As Eric was saying, I was really supposed to be on there late yesterday, but for keeping on time and stuff, we just shifted it over to this morning. What I really wanted to do yesterday was just kind of talk. I mean, it says lemons to lemonade, turning perceived challenges into opportunities, but really just wanted to recap some stuff that we went over yesterday. And give you some food for thought. I was hoping to do it yesterday so you could think over it overnight, but I'm sure some of this stuff is fresh in everybody's mind this morning, and we'll just get into it. But we heard some great presentations yesterday. I really wanted to talk about Josh's presentation on the ESA and the listing process, and go over and recap that the HCP and safe harbor that he was talking about in his presentation is really available to you after the species is listed. Candidate conservation agreement with assurances is what's available to you currently before that species is through the listing process. Dr. Geyer did the population viability analysis and talked about the numbers needed, and I think that was evident to everybody here. What we could possibly do on state and federal lands here in the state to cover the 3 R's that the service is going to be looking for in this plan to preclude listing. And those 3 R's were?
Redundancy, representation.
Resiliency. Yep. So just stuff we need to be thinking about, especially for the discussion part this afternoon. We saw Dr. Herman's talk on the population status on public lands. As I was saying, that gives you an idea of what we think we can put together on public property. And really kind of finished up with Darren's excellent presentation yesterday evening on what working private forest, corporate forest can do for the conservation of the species. Then I wanted to shift over into some other stuff, really talking about the challenges. What are the numbers and where are they? We had good discussion yesterday. I think Jeff Thurman brought it up about we don't need to be looking at some of the smaller tracts of land. We need some folks with 3,000, 5,000, 8,000 acre tracts of property. If we want to really look at not listing this animal. Question that I'm going to put out there, and I'm sure Erica has been talking to some of the participants here. Does NRCS, does industry have data on population numbers that we can get to use in working this plan and hopefully, precluding listing the gopher tortoise? Another thing that we looked at was funding dollars for surveys. Erica's got a small grant. Is there any other mechanisms that we can discuss later on in the day to where we might can find some more funding dollars to do survey work? Another important thing, and one individual, I'm looking for him, but I don't think he's here today, that consults with Porch Creek. Right, ex-NRCS employee, was the role of non-industrial private forest landowners and what they can do in the process. And I think from Sharon's talk, Craig's talk yesterday, secondary populations might be a good thing that we can rely on non-industrial landowners to talk about. Prescribed fire, Darren brought it up, is the elephant in the room. Had some reference to Florida in there, but a lot of Alabama's not as densely populated as Florida is. So I think there may still be some potentials here in Alabama to still use prescribed fire where we can, get away with it from liability and smoke management possibilities. But one thing that I had that we probably need to think about, and Was going to talk about the prescribed burning associations, if there's any mechanism where corporate ownership would possibly entertain the thought if there were some prescribed burning associations that were formed. And everybody knows capacity is a underlying problem on getting acres burnt. That's from NRCS, us, everybody has a problem with capacity. But if there is a willingness and readiness maybe for people to grasp this PBA concept and potentially let those people come on your property and burn. And another thing we're going to roll around into that is trying to fund it. How's that going to be funded on these PBAs? The Nature Conservancy has some MOUs, I know, with state parks, state lands, wildlife, freshwater fisheries on prescribed burning. I was going to ask Chuck to think about it. Is that something that could be extended to other non-industrial private forest landowners or industry? Another thing that I had in here, and it kind of keyed on Darren's talk yesterday, the rotation of good habitat, always on a working forest. I'd been thinking along those same lines that there's some opportunities there. I just wanted to throw out if industry would be willing to possibly look at tweaking management and maybe having a core area that those successional stages worked around. That's a concept that I would like to talk about more this afternoon. Maybe cite those on some of the poorest soils, some of these xeric sand, that would be good for gopher tortoise, but usually pretty input intensive for growing timber on. Are there any mechanisms to, cost share, incentivize industry to do something like that? That's another thing I think that probably needs to be talked about and thrown out. And looked at it. I was hoping Andrew Schott would be here. He was here yesterday. Him and Jimmy Bullock's got the Coastal Headwaters project that is going to probably do some stuff. I would like to talk to them about maybe some of their management stuff in there. Really wanted to talk more about the DOD gopher tortoise crediting strategy. I know a handful of people in here are probably familiar with that. It's DOD because DOD is doing it right now, but I think that crediting strategy could be expanded to cover more people than just the Department of Defense. Sentinel landscapes is another concept. It's a DOI, USDA, DOD partnership. I don't know how many people in here is familiar with Sentinel landscapes. I believe there is a flyer in your packet that you got in your thing. There's 6 of them, fixing to be a 7th one announced. Sentinel landscape, been talking with Al Townsend about it from Fort Rucker. It has to have a key military installation as an anchor point. Would really like to talk with him further and get everybody else on board that would like to participate and maybe getting a Sentinel landscape designation at Fort Rucker. It's not an easy thing to do, but it provides benefits not only to the base but to private landowners that's inside that landscape. It's a good concept that we need to look at. Is there stuff that we can do with Section 6? That will fall between Erica and Amy to really look at what Section 6 can do in the state as far as furthering gopher tortoise conservation. Really wanted everybody to be thinking about that increased prescribed fire capacity. And as I talked earlier about the prescribed burn associations and any way that we can cooperate to get more fire on the ground while we can before we do become as urbanized as Florida is. That pretty much wraps up my notes. So I finished up pretty quick. I had 30 minutes. I guess we can open stuff up for discussion amongst the group, or we can hold off and do that later this evening if you want. I'm going to let you decide.